Good morning, everybody. Monday morning quarterback, episode 5. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you everybody for the feedback. We've gotten great feedback on these videos, and we're looking forward to doing them each week for you. So let me just make sure we got plenty of volume here. All right. Okay. So Monday morning, March 26th, got back late from Nashville. We were down there for the Dixie Thunder Clash. Good event. Fought weather all weekend, but those guys busted their butt trying to make everything happen and everyone get the race in. So hats off to them and thank them for putting on a good event. 204 cars is a huge race for a small club to put on, and everybody at Music City and Dixie Thunder did a great job. Dixie Shootout Series hosted that event, so look forward to doing the rest of those. Good weekend for CSI customers. Justin Sanders picked up a win at Marysville Civil War Series with the last lap pass. So Ryan Riley and the 56 car continue to run good on the West Coast for us, and our wing shock program is getting better by the week. So we're looking forward to continuing to evolve and tune with the wing sprint car stuff. Gary Taylor got a win in Bob Ream's car out in Arizona, ASCS Southwest, using our shocks. So a couple good wing wins for us last week. And then the quarter midget stuff was really good. Jeffrey and Bradley Erickson, as well as Holly Clark, won at the Duel in the Desert opener, and Nolan and Ryan Mitchell, Nolan and his dad Ryan Mitchell, they won Blue Rookie, and Colin Mitchell won Senior Honda at the Dixie Thunder race. We were only able to get in maybe half of the A main, so I think we certainly would have got some more wins, but that was cut short. I'm going to try to get our Facebook Live video. There we go. All right. In the past couple weeks, as you guys have asked questions, we haven't been able to see them because I've just been looking on my phone. So now I got it up on the computer screen and we can roll through. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We have some questions left over from last week, and we'll start with those. And then anybody that's tuned in that has questions, feel free to ask those and we'll get them answered and get everybody started off on a good foot here this week. So last week we had several questions come in, maybe not pertaining to the Monday morning quarterback, but asking about our new conversion sheet. Okay, we've had some good feedback, we've had some bad feedback, so I just want to take a moment to explain why we went that direction. So number one, there's no specific measurement with the old type valving numbers. So for example, a 3-valve shock, that's not a specific unit of measure. That's in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. So whatever the manufacturer determines a 3-valve is, the builder, the tuner, it varies. And for decades we've talked in those numbers, and it's not a specific unit of measure, you know. So we feel it's very important for the customers to talk the correct language, so to speak. And so we've taken the first step in, we're going to give you all the true numbers, a true unit of measure, and that's what we're going to put on the new sheet. And it still has all of the recommendations, you know, heavy track, start, slick, still has all of those recommendations. But for the people that are nervous or have questions about, well, I used to set my shock to a 2.7, now I see all these numbers, you know, what should I set it to? Just reach out to Jake or I. We'll be happy to walk you through that. We've got what we use as a valving conversion, and so you can get a rough idea of what a 2.7 should be in true numbers. And then moving forward, you're going to be talking the right language, and it's going to help us tune your shocks, and it's going to help us better identify issues with handling and where we need to be. When you go from one set of shocks to another set, it's going to help with that, and that's just going to be a better language. So pretty much all the markets we're in, at the highest level, they're talking the true dampening numbers of the shock, not old valving numbers. The only market we're really in that's still using old valving numbers is quarter midget stuff, and I think you'll even see that change at some point. So, Todd, should I be running a bump rubber on the right rear shock all the time so the shock doesn't bottom out? The shock shouldn't bottom out, period. So you shouldn't have to run a bump rubber to keep the shock from bottoming out. So if the shock's bottoming out, either we're too soft on compression dampening, don't have enough air in the tire, too soft of a torsion bar or spring, that's where I would look initially. So you shouldn't have to run a bump rubber to keep the shock from bottoming out on the right rear, especially of a wing sprint car. Now, we have had success recently running a bump rubber on the right rear and holding the right attitude of the car and keeping the car laid left and winging down, but you shouldn't have to do that strictly to keep the shock from bottoming out. Excuse me. If you're having to do that, something else is wrong. Like I say, compression's too soft, torsion bar or spring is too soft, or we don't have enough air in the right rear tire. Look at those things first, but you shouldn't have to run a bump rubber to eliminate the shock from bottoming out. Next thing, we had a question last week from Mongoose Chassis out east, a micro chassis builder. What's the average shock travel for a micro sprint? So depending on the chassis, the track, all of that, typically we're seeing 2 to 3 inches of travel on a micro. Right rear probably going to have the most amount of travel, especially in a non-wing application. In a wing application, it might be the left rear. But you know, typically you're going to be using half to 3/4 of the available travel on a micro. You know, if it's a car that's using 6-inch shocks, typically we're seeing 3 inches of available travel. You're going to be probably using 2 inches of that or so. But if you have specific questions on your exact application, don't hesitate to send me a video. I'll be more than happy to watch that and give you some feedback on what I see as far as shock travel and if we're using too much or not enough. Question that was emailed in about helper springs. So that's very common in midgets, non-wing mini sprints. None of the other stuff we do really is using a helper spring. You're usually seeing it on the front, either just the right front or right front and left rear. So there's 2 trains of thought with the helper spring. Some people run the helper spring divider, and so you have your main spring, your helper spring sleeve, and then the helper spring and your ride height adjuster. As they're raising the front of the car, they're just adjusting that main ride height adjuster, and it's changing the preload on the helper spring as well. The other option is you can independently adjust the preload on the helper spring by running these 2 little lock nuts that we run. It's about 50-50 for us, whether customers want to independently preload the helper springs or not. Me personally, I've always just ran the helper springs and not preload them, but we do have some customers that are very successful doing that. When you independently preload that helper spring, you're just putting it into play more. So a little bit more aggressive as far as forward drive is concerned and stuff like that if you're wanting to independently preload those. Had another question pertaining to wing sprint cars, which we love all these wing sprint car questions, and it was, are we trying to control travel on wing sprint cars with bump rubbers? Short answer is yes. We're trying to control travel. So you do 2 things with a bump rubber. You limit travel, you increase grip by loading the tire. So you're limiting travel by running it on the left rear because you're not wanting to drag the frame rail so hard on entry, which is upsetting the car. And on the right rear, a lot of times in dirty air, the wing sprint cars anymore, they're getting so rolled over on the right rear that the car doesn't transition through the corner the way we want, and so we're starting to run bump rubbers over there to hold the attitude and keep the car kind of laying left, so to speak. Question from John Randall. I've always thought to run more rebound. Okay, so the question is, rough racetrack, more rebound, less rebound. What direction should you go? So there's a stopping point in either direction on that. So slick rough track, you're thinking, well, we need to run more rebound in the shock to keep that corner loaded and have more grip, which is okay, but you're going to reach a point to where you're not letting the car do what it wants. So the tire goes into the hole, wants to come out of the hole, and we're holding it up with the rebound. So if you're thinking of a rough track, okay, the tire hits that first bump and it wants to return down into the valley and then up again. Hits that first bump, we have a bunch of rebound in it. It doesn't let the tire return as quickly as it wants, and now you hit the face of that next bump and it causes the car to get upset and bounce. So typically less rebound is going to get you in and out of the holes better because it's going to keep the tire in contact with the track. So we did reference motocross shocks a couple weeks ago. Those guys are running like 0 rebound because they need their tire to stay in constant contact with the track through whoop sections and fast stuff like that. So this time of year, very common. A lot of racetracks are rough. We're getting a ton of rain. Tracks are saturated. They rut up. Less rebound is going to get you through the bumps better. In that same train of thought, more gas pressure is going to help you get in and out of the bumps better because the shock's going to react quicker. The more gas you put in it, it's going to make it appear as there's more compression, less rebound, the more gas pressure you run. So there could be a fine line there, John, where you're adding some rebound to get grip, but you're leaving the gas pressure in it to try to get in and out of the holes. For every action, there's a reaction. It's kind of a fine line, but definitely less rebound is going to smooth the car out. So if you're at a rough racetrack and you're bouncing around, try pulling a little bit of rebound out. And then I think if you do that, you can tighten the car up other ways. Maybe bring the wheel in a little farther, do some other things mechanically to get the grip you need because you don't have the rebound in the shock and you're not loading that corner quite as much. So that was a good question, and it's one that's kind of a case by case, but a general rule of thought is the less rebound, the better it's going to work on a rough racetrack. Another question from a quarter midget guy, from Rookie Quarter Midget Crew Chief is who it came from. Very slick at Nashville this past weekend. We were fighting rain. The track had very little grip. I ran our race cars tighter than I ever have, almost dirt type setups because it was so slick. So this particular customer raised the front end of his car up substantially, trying to increase front grip. Probably didn't do that. As you're getting the front end up, one train of thought is, oh, you're raising the roll center, but typically on a quarter midget, you raise the front end up. Probably really helped with forward drive, but with the nose that high, the car probably didn't turn very well. So another thing you could have done there with a quarter midget was just get the whole car up in the air to increase your roll center and probably just raise the left side even a little bit more to load that right side. Lower air pressures. Typically, we're 11, 12 pounds in right side tires. We had a lot of guys running, 7 pounds because it was so slick. So those are a couple things you maybe want to do rather than just getting the nose of the car way up in the air. Got a bunch of people tuned in. Any questions from anybody that's tuned in from this past weekend? We'd be more than happy to answer those as we're moving through this. I only have a couple more questions that were emailed in, so anybody that's tuned in, ask some questions, and we'll keep this thing rolling. So, question I had emailed in was, when do you know when you should change gas pressure versus dampening on the shock or compression adjustment? So should I increase the gas pressure or should I bump up the compression? Kind of a fine line there. Typically, we're going to leave gas pressure in on rough tracks for the things that we previously mentioned. So if we go to a slick rough track, we might soften the compression a little bit, trying to get some grip, but we're going to leave the gas pressure in it for better stability on the rough track. So they kind of work hand in hand. and it's just a preference of some guys like keeping gas pressure in. They think it keeps the tire loaded up, and then they would go a little softer on compression to initiate that roll and get side bite. So it's kind of a preference on that question. As we were running through, I've gotten a couple comments as we were running through the guys that won last weekend. So each week we're trying to start this with where we were at last weekend, kind of what's coming up. Some of our customers that won, we're blessed to have so many customers out there, and a lot of them are doing good. We can't mention everybody, but we're just mentioning the ones that were brought to our attention if we didn't catch it. So if you want to be mentioned at the start of these videos, tag us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Let us know how you did last weekend, and we're going to use as many of those each Monday, and that's how we'll start the video, with kind of where we were traveling and how our customers did. So if we didn't get to you, I apologize, but keep tagging us on social media, and we'll try to mention everybody we can who won last week. So as I said at the start, we were at Nashville. This week, USAC Sprint cars are opening in the Midwest at Lawrenceburg. We're supposed to get a lot of rain this weekend, and so hopefully that race gets off. And then we're to Phoenix next week for another quarter midget race, and it'll be the second national race of the year out at PIR. And then we're done quarter midget racing for a little bit, and sprint car and midget season's really getting ramped up out here. So if there's no other questions from everybody, we'll sign off. But we thank everybody for joining. Share the video. Sign up on our Facebook page so you're notified whenever we go live, as we try to increase our customer interaction throughout the year. And we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we hope that you're seeing some benefits from doing this video. If I didn't get your question answered, shoot me an email, comment on here, and we'll cover it next week. Thanks, guys. Have a fantastic week.